Yeah, give me a shout out so I know you guys are paying attention. Thanks. It's great to be your first speaker today in this beautiful church, the Church of Haste and Hustle. I love it. I love everything, the ambiance, everything about it. You know, I have my best friend. She lives in Charlotte, North Carolina. And my girlfriend, Kim, every single day sends me a text, and it's a Bible passage. And every single day I send her a text back that tells her why it doesn't relate to me. So when I got here today, I looked up on the stage and I texted her and I said, you know what, Kim? I'm going to be speaking in a church. And she said, you know, Fay, God works in mysterious ways. So make sure that you get your sermon right. And you know, I started thinking about it. What do I want to talk about to you guys? What is it that I want? What's the message that I want you to walk away with? And really, my main message is simple. In 10 seconds, your entire life can change by something that happens to you or a decision you make going forward. 10 seconds. So when I spoke with Shauna last year and she talked about Haste and Hustle and she was going to put on this great event, and I said, well, why are you putting it on? And she said, you know, I would love to go to an event on marketing and digital media in Niagara. It would be awesome. I said, great. She said, but nobody was putting it on. And then she thought to herself, well, why not me, right? Why not me? I'll put it on. And the passion and enthusiasm that she showed for the event was amazing. And that's really why I got on board, because I wanted her to succeed. Because the reality is, in the digital world, online, you have the ability to do anything you want. There's nothing holding you back, right? Nothing holding you back. And we met great speakers yesterday. How many here were here yesterday? Yes? Great. We talked about chatbots, right? We talked about how to be a creator and how important that was. We did virtual reality. We talked about superheroes. Every single person in the room told you about the decision they made and how it altered their life. And remember the story of having $6,000 in your pocket and a contract on a napkin, right? And then all of a sudden, you created this massive, massive company. So when Shauna said, are you in? I was like, absolutely, I'm on board. I want to make sure that everyone understands that in 10 seconds, you can have a significant difference. You can have an impact. You can change your world. So this summer, I was going to the cottage with my little guy, who's actually in the audience today, and he was 11 at the time, and I was taking with us a couple of his buddies. So I was going to the cottage for a week with boys. And halfway to the cottage, we realized that we forgot his PS4 controllers. So if any of you have boys, you're like, uh-oh, what happens if it rains every day? And I'm stuck. So we stopped in the town of Barrie in the Walmart. We went and got the controllers, and I'm walking out the door, and they're behind me, and I'm listening to them chatter, and I hear them say Casey Neistat. So I turn around, and I'm like, you guys know who Casey Neistat is? And they're, well, yeah, he's like the biggest YouTuber, and he does drones, and he does all this stuff. And I kind of looked at them, and I was like, you know, I'm going to be on this stage with Casey in February. And their jaws dropped, and their eyes got open, and they said, are you somebody? So, right? So in 10 seconds, it didn't matter that I'd spent 25 years in corporate America and I ran $400 million companies and I was responsible for people all over the world. Didn't matter. In 10 seconds, I went from mom to somebody because I was on the stage with someone they knew, all because of the digital media world. Pretty awesome, right? Isn't that interesting how impactful you can be if you actually take the step and go out there? And that always fascinated me because that shift happened in that 10 seconds. I love that whole aspect of having a 10-second shift. So this is my family, and this picture was actually taken about 10 years ago. So the little guy's actually 12 now. And I had a pretty perfect life. I was running, again, business units across multinational organizations, 3 great kids, 4-year-old, a 13 and a 15-year-old at the time, and I had a pretty nice life. I had a great husband, I had a nice house, I had a great dog, and we had a cottage. And life was good, and I was ticking the boxes. How many of you have tick box euphoria, right? You tick the boxes, you get all excited when you tick the boxes, and you're like, yeah, one more down, right? And you're ticking all the boxes, and I was there. And my husband had a dream. His only dream in the whole world was to have a cottage on the water, because we were off water. And all he wanted was to spend time with his family and jumping off the dock and having fun, right? He wanted to be just there for his family. So one day, 8 years ago, he found one, and we put an offer in, and we were closing on that Thursday. But you know, life doesn't always go the way you planned, right? So I went up to the cottage with him and the 4-year-old, so it was just us, and we left the 2 teenagers home alone, first time ever, so it was a little bit stressful, but we left them home. We went up to get the old cottage ready to sell, right? We were preparing, we were closing on the Thursday. So we're really excited, everything was great. We had an awesome day on Friday, and then May 17th, 2009 happened. We had just finished Saturday, we just finished doing most of the work. I'd put the 4-year-old on the couch, he went to sleep. I was reading a book. My husband went upstairs to have a nap because he'd been working all day. And then a couple of minutes later, I heard a scream, piercing scream. And I ran up the stairs, and he was sitting there holding his head. And I could tell he was in severe pain. And he said, "Not now, not when everything's going so good." And then in 10 seconds, I watched his face slowly fall, his limbs, and he fell down to the ground. Now, intuitively, I knew it was a stroke, because we've read about it, right? We understand. But he was 47, played hockey 5 times a week, was in great shape, and I wasn't really sure. So I picked up the phone, called 911. We were at the cottage. It took 45 minutes to get an ambulance. I called my neighbor and I said, "Could you come, Debbie, could you come, run, get Grayson off the couch? He's asleep. He won't know. Put him at your place and I'll take the ambulance because I don't want him to see it." So the ambulance came and we got to the hospital and they were all excited because they said, you know, if we can get him a shot in 2 hours, most of the deficits will go away. And they were very happy and they were just laughing. And then the surgeons put the scan on the machine and their faces dropped. And they said, "It's a brainstem bleed. We can't do anything." So in that moment, all those tick boxes were washed away. Everything we worked for, everything we thought we were going to do, were gone. And then surgeons came in and said, "Bring your kids up because I don't think he's going to make it through the night." So my friends went and brought my kids up, came up. Miraculously, he made it. Intensive care, but they didn't know if he was actually going to make it any further. So for the next 5 weeks, I never left the hospital. My 17-year-old daughter, 17 at the time, was looking after the 4-year-old and my other son, and we just prayed that somehow he would make it through. Somehow he would make it through. When he finally came to, cognitively, he was fine. He was there. He understood what was going on. He understood his family was there. He understood everything around him, and that was a good sign. But he was severely disabled, couldn't walk, didn't have balance, double vision. We knew it was going to be a long road ahead. So he was surrounded by family and understood it, and when he was finally, we propped him up one day because he couldn't sit on his own, feeding tubes. In slurred speech, the first question he asked me, you know what it is? He said, "Where's my BlackBerry?" Any of you have this? Do you guys remember this? Right? It seems like 1,000 years ago, right? So he said, "Where's my BlackBerry?" And that was hysterical to me. I thought, what? Why do you want your BlackBerry? But I realized the importance and how the digital media and digital world made a difference, because what he knew was this was his connection to his customers, to people he spoke with every day, because he already knew he was surrounded by us. That wasn't a problem. But he needed to get back to some sense of what he understood. So he took out the phone. I handed it to him. He could barely hold it because one side was all gone. And he would sit there. He couldn't see, remember, double vision, and he couldn't see. And he would do this all day. The phone wasn't on, but he didn't know. And I would say, Gord, what are you doing? He's like, I'm talking to my customers. And then the nurses would come in and they'd be, what are you doing, Gord? Oh, I'm talking to my customers. There's a problem. I'm helping them with a delivery. So for him, that was his way back into the real world, right? It was fascinating to me, and I always kept track of that. I was like, wow, that is an amazing thing to realize that had the power to bring him back to the real world. Silence. You think you're like, this isn't a great morning story. Like, is she going to do a song and dance at least or something? It gets better. Promise. So he asked the question. He started getting better in terms of cognitive, not physically. And then after about 4 months, they said we could take him home. So, 47, 6'4", can't walk, can't look after himself, can't change, transfer, feed himself, nothing, and they send you home. And so I walked through the house with Gord in a wheelchair and a 4-year-old. So I had one going to kindergarten, one starting high school, and one starting university. And I was looking after him 24/7, and I realized that I was now the only breadwinner in the house. So I had to keep my corporate job. So I would look after him all day, and I would look after the business. Corporate was great to a point until they say, you know what, we can help you all you want, but eventually, if you can't get on a plane to come to a board meeting in London, you really can't work here anymore. So after a year and a half, and that's okay, I understand that, right? And after a year and a half of all of this, I realized that I had to figure out what to do, right? So how many of you have ever had to figure out which Visa bill to pay? Which one should you pay, and which one can you handle the phone calls on, right? Yeah, lots of hands going up. A lot of people don't like to admit it, but it's the truth. And so I realized that I had to figure something out. What was I going to do? And I didn't know what. I wasn't sure, and I was exhausted, and I just didn't know what more could I possibly do. He was also a child with no siblings, and his parents were terminally ill, so I had to look after them too. So one day I was like, I know, I got it. Who knows the Oprah story? The Oprah story about when she finally, couldn't handle everything that was happening, and she found a revelation. I should say that in the church, right? So this is the story of Oprah. So she was so exhausted and tired and wasn't getting any jobs, and she went away for a weekend to a resort, a health resort. At the time, I think it was called Fat Farm, but I don't know if you're allowed to say that now. But that's what it was called. And she went, and she was racing around the track. She was jogging around the track, and she was exhausted, and tears were coming down her face, and she couldn't stand it. And she fell to her knees, and she looked up, and she said, just show me the way. Tell me what to do. I want to be of service. What can I do to change my life? And then somebody ran out, gave her a phone call, and he said, Miss Winfrey, Steven Spielberg's on the call. And she picked up the phone, and Steven Spielberg offered her the role in Color Purple, right? So I thought, maybe I just haven't sank low enough. Maybe I need to ask for help. So I was sitting in my home office, and I felt that I didn't have any more answers. I couldn't do any more. We had no money. We were struggling. I was still looking after everyone. And so I fell to my knees, and I looked up, and I said, give me the answer. Tell me what to do, and I'll do it regardless of what it is. Just give me the answer. And you know what happened? Nothing. Steven Spielberg never called me. No one called me. My dog walked by me, looked at me, and kept going. Right? And I realized in that moment that there was no one on a white horse that was going to come in and save me. It was just me. And in that 10-second time frame, I realized that the only thing I could do was start another business and try to make sure I could look after my family. And the beauty of the digital world, the beauty is that it is open to anyone. So I realized that I could start a business online. I could look after my husband all day, look after my kids, and then when everyone was asleep at 11 o'clock at night, I'd open my laptop, and then I would start working for the next 4 or 5 hours. But that decision, that 10-second decision, was what made it all work for me. And everyone in this room has that opportunity. Every time you hear somebody give you an idea, every time you think this would be good, every time you meet someone, you have the potential to change your life. The difference between you and me is simple. I didn't have a choice or the luxury of thinking about it. Right? Because how many of you have an idea and then you think about it for 2 years? Right? But I didn't have that choice. I had an idea, I had to implement it because I had to do something. And I was implementing until something stuck. So I created these business masterminds and online coaching and strategic initiatives, and that's what made the difference. That was bringing my family what it needed in order to survive. And my kids followed suit because my kids only saw that the real world was an entrepreneur's world. And the only way that our family could make it was to actually go out there and look after themselves. So my son was in university for the past. He just graduated, so it was 4 years. And so my son in university came to me and he said, you know what? It was one conversation. He said, I think I'm going to put some science videos on because it'll look good for my resume, because he was planning to go to med school when he graduated. So I was like, great idea. Remember, had an idea and he implemented. And then a couple of weeks later, he said, you know, this is going really well. Maybe I should monetize it. I'm like, great, how do you do that? I don't know, he figured it out. So he launched his channel, Jacksai. He quit a really lucrative part-time job so he could do his YouTube channel. And that's what brought him through school. That's what paid his way through school. Then he launched another channel because in our house, that's all you saw, was you had the opportunity to take something, make a decision, and go ahead and implement it. And that was the difference. My daughter, at 21, I was having lunch with her, and she said to me, you know, Mom, I see you with all your friends, these entrepreneurs, and you're on stage, and you guys are talking about how successful everything is. This is what you can do. And then I see you guys behind the scenes. And what I see is you talk about how hard things are, the struggles, the challenges, the lack of funds, the lack of support, all the challenges that were in your way. And those are the stories that I need to hear, because at 21, we look at you and we go, and we go, how can we ever be that successful? But when we find out that actually it's a struggle and you do have to make certain choices, that's when we know we could be like you. I said, great, what do you want to do? I said, well, I'm thinking about doing a documentary. Okay, how much money do you need? I don't know, maybe $10,000. And I said, all right, there's something called Kickstarter, because I don't have the money to send you a check. So she went on Kickstarter, she raised the money, did a documentary, which turned into a book, which turned into live events, which turned into online memberships. All that came from one conversation, a 10-second conversation that she actually implemented, right? She actually implemented. That's what made the difference. But what I kept thinking about was that damn BlackBerry, right? That to me was the most fascinating thing when Gord was in the hospital. That he had that connection, he had that connection all that time in his hands. And as I started thinking about where to move with businesses and what to do next, what I realized was that I wanted to somehow have that interplay. Somehow I wanted my business to be connected just like he connected to his customers. So I was having a conversation with someone I met at a conference just like this. How many people have met new people here at a conference? You exchanged information. How many of you are actually going to have conversations with the people, or you just collected the business card? Right? You guys are laughing. So here's the thing. You never know what you're going to do with that person years down the road, right? And I had connected with somebody 4 years ago at a business event just like this, and I just liked him, and we hit it off. So we occasionally had conversations on Zoom or on Skype, and then I called him when I was launching my brand new brand in January. It's called Mastermind City, and it's a community. I wanted to reach out to as many entrepreneurs as I could and do a challenge. I wanted to go through a free challenge, get them trained, make sure they had the tools necessary, regardless if they had money or not. I wanted to make sure we had impact. So I had this conversation. I said, I started in January, and I thought I was just going to put like 60 people through it, right? People that really needed it. And a month later, 1,000 people had gone through. And I hadn't promoted it. And I said, I want to reach more people and give them this training. What can I do? And he's like, well, Fay, I do apps. I'm like, okay. He goes, I'll just do an app for you. I'm like, all right, do an app. What can we put in it? And he said, all your free training will be in there. They can see where you're going to do a live event. They can access you wherever they want. And we can go ahead and do it. So that was just 2 weeks ago. So we got the app going. Who's got an Android, by the way? Anyone have an Android? Okay. So it's on an Android. If anyone comes and sees me later, I haven't seen it because it just got approved. And I have an iPhone. And the iPhone hasn't approved it yet. So if somebody could come to me on break, that'd be awesome. So we put together this app, and that question still bothered me about the BlackBerry, right? How do I connect with my customer, with my client, with my community? So he said, I got this program, and we're going to put it on your phone. And it's a program he has called Lead in 30. So, okay, so how does it work? And how many of you guys do Facebook ads, leads? Right? So a Facebook ad lead is pretty simple, right? You put an ad, somebody fills out the information, including their phone number, and then eventually someone calls them because they've included their phone number, which means they want you to call them, because if they didn't, they wouldn't put their phone number in, right? So I loved that, but I said there was still something missing. He said, well, what happens with this one is it's the exact same thing. You put an ad in, they click, they answer 3 questions that you're interested in learning from them. They put their phone number in, but here's the exciting part. Then that information goes back to you, so it goes back to my team. Instantly, they see the number, they see the name, they see the answers to the question that says, do you want to call them? And it's in 30 seconds. So they actually have the phone still in their hand. They know they want to talk to you. You push the button, and you're live with the person, because the ads only run on mobile devices. That's pretty interesting new marketing plan to go after. But what I loved about it, more important than the actual sales piece, what I liked about it was marrying old school, get on the phone and have a conversation, with new school leads. That's what made the difference. That piece of the marketing made it interesting to me. And I loved the fact that we could go back to it, right? The reality of all of this is really simple. In 10 seconds, we can change everything. Everything you heard about what my kids did or what I did was a direct result of the fact that we just took an idea and decided to implement and move forward, right? We wanted to get action. Act is one of my favorite words. Action changes things. If you take action, you will get better. If you take action, things will change. And that's the difference. So today in this church, in this environment where you have ideas, where you get new interesting concepts and passions, you can take that idea and you can implement it. Or you can take something new you've learned, or take somebody that you've just met, and all of a sudden, everything changes. But the challenge is, you have to do it, right? So last night, we were at dinner, speaker's dinner, and I was sitting, my guys? I was sitting at the cool end of the table. Sorry for you guys that weren't there. And we were laughing because now, I think, what do we have going? We have somebody's writing a book. Somebody's doing strategic business plan for the health industry. And then someone else is, what are they implementing? I can't remember. There were so many ideas. But what I said to them was like, look, these are great ideas, and this is an opportunity. The difference is you actually have to do it. So when I see you next time, I'm going to say, hey, what happened with that idea? Did you actually do anything with it? Did you actually implement it? Some of the guys up there are hiding. That's the beauty of the 10-second shift. So my goal in this conversation that I had with you, my goal is to ensure that you're taking what you learned today and implementing. Whenever I do workshops or seminars, I always say to people, you came in with one depth of knowledge, but you're leaving with a completely new knowledge point. The problem with that is that you can't go back to where you were before you came, because things can only get worse, right? Because you're smarter. So you have to take the knowledge, take the concepts, and implement them. So 10 years later, my husband is still severely disabled. We look after him 24 hours a day. Same as always. It's a brain injury, so it gets worse, not better. But here's the thing. When something tragic happens in your life, you all of a sudden realize the beauty of life and the brevity of life. And what comes out of that is things that you never even thought about. So when people tell you that out of tragedy comes great things, it's true. It's true. If it hadn't happened, my son wouldn't have launched his business. My daughter wouldn't have touched thousands of women across the globe. I wouldn't be on this stage as a somebody if that hadn't happened, right? And so it does, would I want it to? Absolutely not. If I could go back to 2009, May 17th, I would take those 10 seconds back in a heartbeat, but I can't. But what I can appreciate is the ability to understand that we all have the opportunity to make it better. Thank you.